bhagavate vasudevaya. So we are starting up with the 11th chapter. You know, the Gita is not the oldest Sanskrit text out there. There's different ways of measuring the age of a book. You can look for where that book was mentioned in another book, and that'll give you a latest possible date. You chanting? Figure it out, man. There may be some possibility of chanting while you listen to a lecture, but you're not there yet. Not your program. Just either go or stay. Yeah, you can get the latest possible date for the writing of a book by looking at when it's mentioned somewhere else in another source. If text B mentions text A, then it means that text A was written before text B. If the story of text B is on a stone, is carved into a stone building, and you can date the carving of the stone, then you know that the text was written prior to that. You follow this? You can also look at the language that was used. You know, if you get thou and thee, and thou, and stuff like that, then you know you're dealing with an older version of English. That then sometimes gets a little dicey because sometimes people can make something sound older than it actually is. And that happens in Hinduism quite a bit. Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little... Can you hear me, Kim? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. You guys just got to get a little closer. Sorry, I'm a little tired, so I'm not going to yell like I normally do. Just going to have to cope. Normally I would just up my volume, but I'm really not feeling it today. Can you hear me? All right. So there's a whole thing called Sanskritization, where people will give things Sanskrit names to make them sound older than they are. Like there's Trikonasana, which is triangle pose, but it's new. It's like 80 years old. But they give them all fancy, you know, you can look, you can find older texts and what are the yoga poses mentioned in that text, and then, you know, there's some major texts, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and Garanda Samhita, and Shiva Samhita. There's some kind of, you know, medieval yogic texts which tell you the names of asanas and how to perform them. But that Trikonasana, the triangle pose, three-angle pose, isn't in any of them. And you can see it getting made up by Patabi Joyce, by Krishna Namacharya, the guru of Patabi Joyce, and Iyengar, BKS Iyengar. But he would give everything a Sanskrit name. Raghunath does this too. Raghunath renames all the asanas and gives them names of Vishnu and tries to give them Krishna conscious names because he's part of our sect. So he figures, why should I call them these other people? These other people made it up 100 years ago or something, so why should I make it up? And so like warrior pose, I think, maybe becomes Trivikramasana. That might be another pose in itself, but he has different names he gives. They're based on names of Vishnu. So the Gita is written in classical Sanskrit. It's not written in Vedic Sanskrit. It's written in just a later form of Sanskrit. The Sanskrit language has undergone a number of transformations. And so the oldest stratum is Vedic Sanskrit, and then you get younger Sanskrit, the epic Sanskrit, the Puranic Sanskrit. And so the language just changes a little bit over time. So you can date the Gita based on that. Of course, that's not always the best way to date either, because somebody, like I said, could make up an older language. But also, what if the story was older, but as it was told through an oral tradition, then gradually people changed the language, but the story itself was very old. Like, what if there was a story in French, old French or old German or something like that, and then that story was told generation after generation, and by the time you heard the story, it was told in modern French. And so you would wrongly conclude that the story was recent. But in fact, it may have been old, and just as it was passed down, people translated it. And you'd end up with a misunderstanding of the date of something. Do you guys follow this? So we can look at the age of the Sanskrit. You can look at other texts where it's mentioned. These are things scholars do. You can look at the numismatic evidence that shows up on coins. Like I said, you can look at architectural evidence, stone carvings and such. To some extent, that stuff is all irrelevant. Let's say I wrote a book now, and in that book I discovered a universal truth, a universal law, I don't know, electromagnetism, which was discovered in the last 150 years. It wasn't invented, it was discovered. It existed, obviously, prior to 150 years ago, but people just didn't notice. And as they started looking around, and they knew about, weak nuclear force, decay, but they knew about gravity, but then, they posited this other force, electromagnetism. And they figured that out, that existed, and they started to put that into their computations and equations, and everything started to make more sense. Or, we find new fundamental particles. They were always there, we just didn't notice them. It's not like we invented neutrinos. They're new. When I was a kid, neutrinos didn't exist, but they did. We just didn't have powerful enough microscopes to notice them. You guys follow this? So it's important to know when you're discovering something, and to some extent, it doesn't matter when something was written. What matters is its truth value. Its truth value. Does it help you make better sense out of the world in which you live? Is it universal? Is it true in all times? Is it true in all places? That's what universal means. Does it make the world come into focus? Is there good evidence for it? these are the kind of questions we should be asking ourselves when we encounter a set of teachings. Somehow there's this idea that something is old, it's true. But there were terrible, foolish people in the past. There were awful ideas that were quite standard in the past. And so just because something's old, slavery is a really old idea. So old it's there in the Hebrew Bible. And before, it goes back to like Hannibal. I mean, you find it everywhere. So does that mean it's a good thing? Egyptian hieroglyphs depict slaves. Does that mean that slaves are a good thing because it's old? No. So, in general, I think that trying to look at the historicity of something, trying to analyze something academically through historical linguistic evidence or through numismatic evidence, that's coins or whatever it might be, and figuring out the earliest and latest possible dates. Although that stuff I think has value, I really don't think it should be somebody's primary focus when reading a spiritual text. I think the primary focus should be on the value that text adds to your life and the evidence that you find for the ideas encoded within the text. Are they self-evident? Do they have evidence? What kind of arguments are made? I think this is a much better use of our time as a first step. There may be a place for all that dating stuff. There's value in it, but it should always be a secondary pursuit. Anyway, the Gita's not the oldest Vedic literature. One easy way to know that is that Krishna quotes earlier literature in the Gita. Krishna makes use of philosophical ideas that were encoded and first introduced in earlier texts. And Krishna builds on those ideas, sometimes repeats them, sometimes reinterprets them. He gives the example of the Ashwatha tree in the 15th chapter. And that goes back to several Upanishads, and he gives his own twist on that with things like the gunas and Sankhya and yoga. He's clearly making use of earlier literature and using those words and that terminology in fairly standard ways. He quotes directly verses from the Upanishads repeatedly to make points. He references the Brahma Sutras, although it doesn't appear he's talking about what we know as the Brahma Sutras. He's talking about a different body of literature. Anyway, it's clear that the Gita wasn't written in a vacuum as the first of books. And so Krishna spoke when there was already a Vedic culture in full effect. I think it's pretty common for religions to try to say we're super old. The Jews, it's like 600-700 BC is normally about where scholars would place the Jews. They like to go back to 1800 BC. That's their textual tradition, takes them back 3,800 years instead of 2,700 years. That's kind of the way they like to do it. So there's a gap there of over 1,000 years. And there's this idea that if you're older, you're better. maybe like you're spiritual. Maybe you come from God because God can't do anything later. He can only do stuff like a long time ago. So if God was to get involved in the world now, that would be weird. And so there's like some rule, you know? A long time ago, God was more involved in the world, and that's okay. And so the older you are, the more likely you are to have a spiritual book. But if you've got some new realization, something that you're just penning down now, it's enough for most people to dismiss it. So yeah, the Gita is not the oldest text in the Vedic canon. And it freely makes use of motifs and language and terminology and philosophical ideas that were established previously and had become fairly standardized by the time the Gita was composed or spoken. Do you guys follow that? And we're going to encounter one such idea today. As far as an introduction, Krishna laid out his arguments over about 5 chapters for why he should be accepted as God. And then Arjuna, in the beginning of the 10th chapter, accepted that. He said, okay, I'm in. And then he asked a follow-up question. Instead of being settled and that being the end of the discussion, Arjuna's acceptance of Krishna's divinity and the truth of what Krishna had spoken, it led to follow-up questions. And Arjuna's main follow-up question was how to know you in this world. Divinity is, generally speaking, a fairly abstract concept. If we were to talk about ears or earrings or necklaces or shirts or flasks or book stands, watches, then those things are fairly easy to point to and demonstrate, and we all have a lot of practical experience of them. When you start to talk about things which are more abstract, compassion, love, depth, integrity, these ideas generally require a little more verbiage and a little more work to start to flesh out, because they are less empirically demonstrable. They exist, but they're more fundamentally subjective. Maybe you make an attempt to rigorously define integrity in a way that makes it objective, but especially when you're talking about love and happiness, things of that nature. There's a certain je ne sais quoi, something it's a little hard to put your finger on. And so although morality, all this stuff essentially is metaphysical. It's metaphysical, it's something that goes beyond the physical world. An example that I would normally give is, I can say how tall this book stand is, but I can't say whether it's tall or short. I can say how many inches off the ground it is. But if you're like, is it a tall book stand or a short book stand? That judgment call can't be objectively demonstrated. Is it a tall book stand? Well, it depends on who's looking at it. If it's a very short person, they might think it's a tall book stand. If it's a very tall person, they might think it's a short book stand. Is it a good book stand? Well, I don't know. It depends on what you're trying to use it for. If you were trying to use the book stand to beat someone to death, it's probably not that good of a book stand. That's what you're, And so anytime you start to talk about something being tall or short or good or bad or useful or not, you have to take another idea as your axiom and then judge the book stand and its height against that axiom. Namely, how tall am I? How tall are you? How tall is the average person? What are these things used for? How many usages should you be able to get out of this? What should it be made out of? I now have ideas. Like a wood book stand is a good book stand. So is this a good book stand? Well, it's made out of wood, so it's good. But I have the idea that wood is good. Metal is bad. Higher than my waist is good. Lower than my waist is bad. Strong enough to drop out of an airplane and have it not break is good. Sturdy. You follow? I have some idea that I'm importing into the discussion, and I'm using that to then decide how to think about something as mundane as a book stand. I don't know if I'm doing a great job of explaining this because I'm extremely tired. So I'm just going to say it again. And hopefully I'll make my point more clear the second time around. When you begin to judge things' value, are they good, are they bad, do they have value, do they not have value, you have to have a basic premise already in play of what makes something valuable or what makes something not valuable. Then you take the item and you judge that item against your already pre-existing premise that you've imported in the discussion, oftentimes without even acknowledging it to yourself or the other party. You just assume that like your axiom, your premise, your value system is normative, and then you judge the world according to that value system. You don't actually examine that, and that's why when you start to make judgments about what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, automatically you're getting into this fuzzy, abstract, metaphysical world. This is framed out that you can't get should from is. You can't get a should from an is. That's Hume's, right? And then we also call this the fact-value distinction. The fact is this is 2 feet high. The value, is that high enough? That's up to you. That depends on how you choose to define what high enough is. Do you follow? Therefore, anytime you place a value on something, you are engaged in metaphysics in the sense that you are engaged in something which goes beyond meta, the physical world, physica, metaphysics, beyond the physics. Did you guys follow this? That made sense the second time around? Okay. So when we start to talk about love and this and that, these concepts are metaphysical, moral truths are metaphysical, what you should do, what you should value. These are all extremely metaphysical, and I'm just using the word abstract because it's not self-evident, it's not incorrigible, and it's not necessarily empirically demonstrable. You can say how tall it is, but you can't say what you should do with it. You can't get a should from an is. You have to jump to should. You get to is, but if you want to get should, you have to jump. You follow? And so essentially to introduce a value. To give a simple example, one time Prabhupada was talking to a female reporter. And, just like so many reporters in the 70s who interviewed Prabhupada, she said, why do you shave your head? Why do you guys shave your heads? Just being totally ignorant of huge old cultures, that a third of the world's population participates in, where tonsuring, religiously cutting your hair, was normative. Just utter foolishness. Like you have no homework whatsoever. You go and meet a Hindu monk, and the best thing you come up with is, why do you shave your head? Like you couldn't get out an encyclopedia and find out that it's an act of renunciation. That's the best you can come up with. Some kind of a primitive attempt at a hot take. And so Prabhupada's response was, well, why do you shave your legs? It was a girl, it was the 70s, she was wearing a miniskirt. So he said, why do you shave your legs? And she was stumped. It's a really interesting question. Why do you shave your legs? Right? Because it's smooth and nice? Well, how come the men don't do that? If it's smooth and nice, how come it's not normative for men to shave their legs? It's normative for women to shave their legs. You follow? And don't go trying to be a smarty pants and be like, well, some guys do shave their legs, this or that. If you look at the average male in the United States, they don't shave their legs, unless they're like a cyclist. If you look at the average female in the U.S., they do shave their legs. Why is that? I mean, the answer is easy. It's kind of socially accepted behavior. It's considered to be more sexy, and you're supposed to be better looking if you shave your legs. So it's become a convention, normative behavior, and then everybody follows it. I mean, there's really weird ones. Why do you get circumcised? That's like a really weird one. Why do you, at a very young age, cut off a part of your genitals and have elective surgery in the first few days of your life? What's the value in elective genital mutilation in the first few days of your life? How is that good? And there's all sorts of foolish answers like it's cleaner. It's not. It's this, that. It's just all untrue. What now? Well, the Jews do it. They didn't make the early Christians do it. If you look at the New Testament, they didn't require new converts to Judaism who were following Jesus, who were Gentiles, to then be circumcised in adulthood. But it's become now normal if you're born Christian. I mean, there's a whole thing. Kellogg wanted you to... The guy who made Kellogg cornflakes, he donated a ton of money to promote circumcision about 100 years ago. And he said it would teach people to associate pain with sex, and so it was a good thing. It's a whole weird thing. It wasn't so common 100 years ago, 120 years ago, but he really made a campaign. It became normative. And then everybody started getting circumcised. And then recently, in the last 30 years, it's no longer as standard as it used to be. It's dropping off. But if you go back 50 years, 60 years, 95% of the U.S. population was circumcised. Male population was circumcised. Can you hear me today? Okay. That's bizarre. And how do the Jews justify that? Well, our sacred text says that. I mean, that's a rough one. Your sacred text says you should engage in genital mutilation of all the male children at a young age. I don't know. I might have a problem with that. Just because somebody said a long time ago, I don't know that that's enough. What's our culture? Okay, great. I mean, the Muslims have a culture where they mutilate the genitals of their girls, and nobody seems to like that, so how come it's okay for the Jews to do it to their boys? You guys follow this? You start to ask these sort of Socratic questions. Well, why this? Why this? Well, why are you doing this? Well, what's the purpose of that? And, because I said so isn't a very good answer, at least when it comes to things like elective surgery for small children. What honestly amounts to mutilation. Well, we think that looks like more natural or more streamlined or whatever. It's like, we start cutting the ears off of children too because you think it looks more streamlined? I mean, like, how is that, you know what I mean? Like, you talk about streamlining. I mean, just cut your ears off. You want to get streamlined, right? You follow? Cut down on wind resistance. I mean, that's like, you get it? So, Prabhupada said, why do you shave your legs? And the woman's just stunned. And he finished up and he said, better cool head, warm legs for spiritual life. That was it. Like, mic drop. She was just like, I wish I'd gotten out the encyclopedia. I mean, you imagine how humiliating that was, right? And so there's value in questioning other people and questioning yourself. And just because something was written a long time ago doesn't mean it gets a pass. And just because something was written recently doesn't mean it can't be true. We got to learn to be more interested in figuring out what's actually going on and how much value does it have. So anyway, the ultimate abstract thing is God. There are logical arguments for the existence of God, such as the cosmological argument is a really good one. There's also teleological arguments. There's the ontological argument. There's a number of different traditional logical arguments for the existence of God, which are meant to make people pause. But the very fact you need to make a logical argument for something means that it's not self-evident. Same way, just as self-evident. It means it's not immediately observable. It means it's not just, automatically repeatable in a laboratory environment where anybody can do the experiment and it's just easy. It requires you to do some thinking because it's not right in front of you. You follow this? That doesn't mean it's not true. There's all sorts of abstract, weird things. Like, for instance, you guys, I think, are all conscious. This is called the problem of other people's minds. The problem of other minds. I think all you guys are conscious. But what hard evidence do I have that you are all conscious? Zero. You could say, well, when I shoot you, you bleed. And that's proof that you're conscious. You follow? Or when I pinch you, you say, ow. And therefore you're conscious. No, those are symptoms that are analogous to symptoms I have, and I'm conscious, and so I think that would mean that you're conscious because I'm conscious and I display these symptoms, and then when you display those same symptoms, I think analogously, and I extrapolate from myself onto you. You need to go? You want to bounce?
What's that?
You want to take them?
Yeah.
Okay, adios. The Lord giveth. So, you could be a sophisticated robot. Or you could be a philosophical zombie that appears to be conscious like I am by displaying similar symptoms, but is actually devoid of an internal world of thought and feeling. You can be programmed to say ouch even though you don't really feel anything. How do I know that when I pinch you, you really feel something? Well, I can measure your brain waves. But brain waves might be correlates of conscious experience, but they are not the same as conscious experience. How do I know that you're conscious, that you have an internal world with taste, sight, touch, smell, and sound, and thoughts, and feelings, and a voiceover narrative, and all of that? How do I know that? I cannot. I cannot empirically demonstrate that you are conscious. I can only empirically demonstrate that I am conscious. I don't have to empirically demonstrate. It's self-evident because you're conscious. But then I can analogously, I can think that, oh, well, you're probably like me. And I can extrapolate inductively from my own experience and then guess that there's a strong possibility that you may also be conscious. But because consciousness is experienced in the first person, I can't know for sure because I can't be you. I can only look at these symptoms or the correlates of consciousness. I can't actually see your consciousness. You guys following this? So things do exist which aren't empirically demonstrable. We experience them on a regular basis. We live in a world where abstract things which aren't empirically demonstrable, are nonetheless very, very real, and we accept them, and to not accept them would seem preposterous. Therefore, it does seem that there are things that do truly exist, but they are a little bit abstract, and it's difficult to empirically demonstrate them, or it's impossible to, but nonetheless, they exist. And this means we live in a world which is a little more abstract than we might want to admit. The ultimate abstract thing is God. Other people's consciousness, that's not that big of a jump. An invisible creator of everything, that's a bigger jump. You follow? So, Arjuna had been convinced. I think swimmers also shave their legs. Carlos, dude, yours. There are any number of people who shave their legs for any number of reasons. I was giving one or two examples. The goal in life is not to write stuff that doesn't add anything to the class to demonstrate that you're not as smart as you think you are. It's just like, there's no value in that. There's all sorts of people who shave their legs for all sorts of reasons. And swimmers are amongst them, and so are cyclists, and so do wrestlers, and so do so many people. So do MMA fighters, but so what? I just was trying to make a point. Just roll with me, bro. Where was I?
It's more abstract than you think. Consciousness is an easy jump. God's more abstract, invisible creator of everything.
And you just said Arjuna accepted.
Arjuna accepted that Krishna existed, and rather than going through a number of arguments for why that's reasonable, it then led him to another question. And that question was, how can I see you in this world? Like, I accept you've shown yourself to me sufficiently. But how can I see you when I go back into the world, which does seem to be pretty darn atheistic and material, and it's pretty easy to forget abstract things like your value system, like your morals, like your honor, these more abstract metaphysical truths are more elusive. And they are more, I live to be corrected and chastised. Okay, but if that's your thing, just don't write back to me. If that's your thing, then you figure that out, but not on my dime, brother. Because I'm trying to give class. And so if you live to be corrected and chastised and you've got that kind of masochistic thing going on, no problem. But don't do it while I'm giving class. We should limit the discussion to things which add to the class, because I'm trying to go in a particular direction. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing stuff. And when you raise your hands or you space out or you ask an off question or you write an off comment, it takes my mind away from what I want to discuss. So you may have something valuable to add. And I think you did last week. I think you said something really nice I appreciated last week. So, whatever. I mean, baseball players with a really good batting average are still only getting a hit like 1 out of 3 at bats. So it's not the worst thing in the world to strike out once in a while. But it means you're swinging. But let's try and stay focused. And I appreciate your whatever kind of humility that is, faux or sincere. I can't tell because your face is too small on my screen. But let's just help Tuka be streamlined like that swimmer with shaved legs who's able to move and glide through the water without cutting my ears off in the process. Okay, so it's really easy to get caught up in an atheistic world and forget your values and forget your higher, more abstract truths. And so if you want to walk the spiritual path, you really have to become an expert at living in a slightly more abstract world. Now that's not a bad thing. Smart people do that. Philosophers are trained to live in a more abstract world. Spiritualists are trained to live in a more abstract world. A deeper, more thoughtful, more thought out, more logical, more reasonable, but less just animalistic and what's right in front of you world. If you look at a bird, they're so present. Like right there. They're just right there, freaked out all the time, right? Jumping around, bouncing around, flying away, jumping around, bouncing around, pecking at stuff. Jump around, jump in the air, mate, go back to pecking at stuff, looking behind themselves, jumping up. They're so focused, isn't it? They're not chill at all. They're not like a sloth, They're extremely, they have a major anxiety disorder, isn't it? Right? They're having a constant panic attack. They're super vital, though. They're right there. Good to see you, Prabhu. That's animal life. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Again. Real, everything's really life and death. Birds are so small. There's so many predators want to chomp on a bird, right? And then their primary mechanism for defense is speed. They fly away quickly. So that's the defense mechanism. So they always got to be on point because they're like a fighter who boxes on the outside. They've always got to be moving, sticking that jab and moving, pecking a little food and then moving. And they're like the opposite of an apex predator, Maybe they can eat insects, but any of the larger animals, cats and stuff like that, they're just, right? So that's animal life. It's really immediate, sensual. It's really really grounded in some ways, in your skin, right there, fully present. We human beings have the ability to live in a much more abstract, much more thoughtful world, and I think there's value in that. We have these big, huge brains, we might as well use them. And so Arjuna said, look, I want to be able to look at this world in a deeper way. And then Krishna explained 70 different ways that he could look at the world and see Krishna. And then he used that, he explained a principle, which was whenever you see something amazing, then you're seeing a little spark of Krishna's splendor. And so you would think that God was simply pantheistic, available in this world. Then he jumps in and says, actually just by one little piece of myself, I maintain the whole world. You follow? So then, what happens in this next chapter? Well, let's find out. By my hearing the instructions you've kindly given me about these most confidential spiritual subjects, my illusion has now been dispelled. Okay, that's pretty good. Right? Right? That's pretty amazing, right? Krishna's instructing Arjuna, and the result is that Arjuna feels clear. O lotus-eyed one, I've heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity, and have realized your inexhaustible glories. Okay. Fine. So you explained to me, about the difference in the body and the soul, and coming and going to this world. You explained about yourself, right? Though I see you here before me in your actual position, as you described yourself, I wish to see how you have entered into the cosmic manifestation. I want to see that form of yours. I want to see your Rupam Aishwaram. I want to see your form of opulence, your powerful form. You just described to me something about your power, how you're in everything, and you're the Alpha and the Omega, the strength of the strong, and, right? The ability of mankind, and the intelligence of the intelligent, and the sun and the moon, and the Himalayas, and sharks, and every amazing thing you see in the world is a spark of Krishna's splendor. I want to see it. I don't just want to philosophically understand it. I don't just want to live in an abstract, more thoughtful, more philosophical world. I actually want to experience transcendence. Do you follow this? Look at that. I wasn't just on some kind of weird bend about dating literature, evidence, metaphysics, abstract versus real stuff. We were headed here. I don't just want to abstractly understand you. I don't want to live in a philosophical world. I don't just want to logically understand you. I don't just want to, out of faith, accept your existence. I actually want to see it. I wish to see how you've entered this cosmic manifestation. I want to see that form of yours. If you think I'm able to behold that cosmic form, oh my Lord, then kindly show me that unlimited universal self. So he's humble, but he's bold. He's making a bold proposal in a humble way. Prabhupada used to say that. You make a bold proposal in a humble way. I'd like to see you as you've just described yourself, my Lord. You just described yourself as this incredible, powerful, universally present, that you're in everything, and that you're maintaining the whole world. The whole world is connected to you, like pearls on a string. That you are the way and the weft of this world. You are the ultimate source of everything which exists in this world, and every amazing thing is actually part of you and is somehow or other a part of this universal presence that you have. I want to see that. And Krishna says, see now my opulences, hundreds of thousands of very divine and multicolored forms. See here the different manifestations of Adityas, Vasus, Rudras, Ashwini Kumars, and all the other demigods. Behold the many wonderful things which no one has ever seen or heard before. Remember when Krishna said, of the Adityas I am this, of the Vasus I am this, of the Maruts I am this. So now he's saying all those things I just told you about in the last chapter, see them now. Here they are. Look at me and you'll see everything. O Arjuna, whatever you wish to see, behold at once in this body of mine. This universal form can show you whatever you now desire to see and whatever you may want to see in the future. Everything moving and non-moving is here completely in one place. What a radical idea, right? Iha eka stam, here in one place. Jagat kritsnam, the whole universe. Pasha adya, see it today. So far, it's like, talk about like calling somebody's bluff, right? And Krishna's like, okay, I said the source of everything. Here it is. I'm going to show you that I am actually the source of everything. Look at me and you will see everything coming from me. But you cannot see me with your present eyes, therefore I give you divine eyes. Behold my mystic power, my mystic opulence, my yogam aishwaram. My yoga here means power, because through power you can acquire things. And so yoga means acquisition or joining things. So yoga also means power, because you have the power to join anything together and make anything happen. And this is my yoga aishwara, my opulent power, my opulent yoga, my mystic power, my mystic opulence. O King, having spoken thus, the Supreme Lord of all mystic power displayed his universal form to Arjuna. So he showed Arjuna his Rupa Aishwarya, his form of power, his opulent form. So it's interesting. Krishna says, with these mortal eyes you can't see it, so I have to, by grace, empower you to be able to actually experience how I am holding it all together and in everything. We think that nama nami no abhed. There's no difference between the person named and the name of the person. Therefore, when you chant Krishna's name, Krishna is actually with you. When you chant Krishna's name every day with a vow, Krishna's with you every day. Like your best friend, your soulmate, always with you, never forsaking you, helping you through everything you go through. Krishna's name is Krishna. If you chant Krishna's name properly, we say Kali Kale Nama Rupe Krishna Avatar. That in the Kali Yuga, Krishna descends as his name. We call Krishna's name Nam Prabhu. We refer to the name as a person. Sometimes devotees will worship the Maha Mantra on their altar. They'll have a picture of the Maha Mantra and they'll do arti to it. Devotees used to live in temples exclusively, but then they started going out to travel and do outreach work and sell books. And they had to start eating, go to grocery stores and buy stuff and figure out a way to eat. It's because they were just eating in the temples before. And so it became a whole debate. And they went to Prabhupada and they asked him, are we allowed to eat outside, go and buy food and just do whatever? And Prabhupada said, yeah, you can eat any damn thing you want. Now, obviously. But he was just trying to make this point. If you're out preaching, you can eat any damn thing you want. And he said you can prepare food and you can offer it to the book. The book is a deity. You can offer the food to the book that you are distributing. You can offer the food to that because that book is actually a deity. You follow? It's a wild idea. But anyway, the name of Krishna is, for us, is Krishna. And when you chant, and you chant sincerely, you'll see Krishna in the holy name. You'll see Krishna in the sound of his name. The name will open up, and you'll have a rapturous experience of divinity just from chanting. And you'll realize, wow, the name is actually Krishna. I thought that was just something they said, but the name is actually Krishna. That's kind of our version of this. This idea of a Vishvarupa, seeing the universe as God, is old. It goes back to the Upanishads. It's an old idea. It makes a lot of sense. If God's truly connecting everything, then there should be a vision of self-realization you can have where you see how everything is connected to God. And the matrix is pulled back and you see the machinery of how Krishna is everywhere in all things at all times. It's a reasonable question. It's Arjuna not foregoing his intelligence and really thinking it through, accepting what Krishna says, but still wanting more. You guys following this? Arjuna saw in that universal form unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, unlimited wonderful visions. The form was decorated with many celestial ornaments, bore many divine upraised weapons. He wore celestial garlands and garments, and many divine scents were smeared over his body. All was wondrous, brilliant, unlimited, and expanding. And here's the kicker. If hundreds of thousands of suns were to rise at once into the sky, their radiance might resemble the effulgence of that supreme person in that universal form. What a beautiful meditation. What a wonderful verse. So the 10th and the 11th chapter are united in that Krishna describes himself philosophically and abstractly in a way that's real. That's the way philosophers and theologians and spiritualists view the world, metaphysically. It's the way we view other people as being conscious. It's the way we come up with values. It's the way we come up with morals. We do live in an abstract world. But Arjuna wants to see it and experience it and not have it just be merely an abstract world. And this is the journey of spirituality. You start off with a concept, but then you start to work with that concept, and you try to have an experience of divinity. And you think through, well, if Krishna's in everywhere and everything, I should be able to see everything. And in fact, that's what Arjuna was saying, how Krishna was, in fact, connected to everything. All right, I'm exhausted. Thank you guys so very much. Hare Krishna.